The sun was shining bright over the hills of Malibu, casting a warm, golden glow across the Pacific Coast Highway. It was one of those perfect afternoons where the ocean breeze cuts through the heat, making everything feel crisp and clean. Most people were tucked away in air-conditioned offices or driving in cars with windows rolled up, rushing to get to the next thing on their list. But for one man on a black motorcycle, the day was about the journey, not the destination. Keanu Reeves loved these rides. They were his escape. When he wasn't on a movie set performing stunts or learning lines for the next big blockbuster, he was just a regular guy who loved the feel of the engine beneath him. He wore his usual gear, a sturdy helmet, a leather jacket, and boots that had seen better days. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself. In fact, he often preferred to blend into the background, just another face in the crowd of Los Angeles traffic. As he rode along the winding roads, the wind rushing past his ears, he let his mind clear. There were no scripts to read, no cameras pointing at his face, and no expectations to live up to. It was just him, the machine, and the open road. He took a deep breath, though the helmet muffled the sound, and felt a sense of peace that was hard to find in his busy life. Traffic was light, which was a rare treat for this part of town. He cruised at a steady pace, enjoying the scenery. On one side of the road, the tall cliffs rose up, covered in dry, golden grass. On the other side, the blue ocean stretched out endlessly, sparkling under the sun. It was a beautiful sight, one that never got old no matter how many times he saw it. Up ahead, something on the side of the road caught his eye. It wasn't a car or a landmark. It was a splash of color against the dusty brown shoulder of the highway. As he got closer, he realized it was a small table. It looked like a child's plaything, a bit wobbly and covered in a bright red tablecloth. Slowing down, Keanu narrowed his eyes behind his visor. Sitting behind the table was a young girl. She looked to be maybe 9 or 10 years old. She had her hair in messy braids and was wearing a t-shirt that was a little too big for her. She was sitting on a plastic crate, swinging her legs back and forth, looking a little bored and a little hopeful at the same time. It was a classic lemonade stand. Most cars zoomed right past her. The drivers were probably focused on their destination, their eyes glued to the road, or maybe they just didn't want to stop. They saw a kid with a table and kept going, lost in their own busy worlds. But Keanu wasn't like that. He had a soft spot for the simple things in life. He remembered being a kid and trying to make a few dollars or just trying to do something that felt important. He decided to pull over. Checking his mirrors, Keanu gently eased off the throttle and signaled. The deep rumble of his bike quieted as he slowed down and steered onto the gravel shoulder. He came to a smooth stop a few feet away from the table. The kickstand went down with a satisfying clunk, and he cut the engine. Suddenly, the roar of the bike was gone, replaced by the sound of the wind in the trees and the distant crash of waves. The girl looked up, startled by the noise. Her eyes went wide when she saw the tall figure swinging a leg over the motorcycle. She sat up straighter, smoothing out her tablecloth, clearly excited that she actually had a customer. She watched with curiosity as the rider reached up and unlatched his helmet. Keanu pulled the helmet off his head, shaking his hair loose. He ran a hand through it and set the helmet down on the seat of his bike. He didn't look like a movie star right at that moment. He just looked like a guy who had been for a long ride. He had a kind face, slightly weathered by the years, but his eyes were warm. He walked over to the table, his boots crunching on the gravel. The girl smiled nervously. She had a jar filled with ice, a pitcher of yellow liquid, and a stack of small paper cups. There was also a handwritten sign made from a piece of cardboard, written in colorful markers with big, shaky letters. It said, "Fresh lemonade, 50 cents. Keanu looked at the sign, and a genuine smile spread across his face. It reminded him of a time when life was simpler, when 50 cents felt like a lot of money, and a lemonade stand was the biggest business venture in the world. "Hi there," Keanu said, his voice low and friendly. "Hi," the girl replied, her voice quiet but polite. She looked up at him, maybe wondering why this biker had stopped, but she seemed happy he did. Keanu looked at the setup. It was charming. The table was covered in little drawings she had probably done herself, flowers, suns, and smiley faces. It was clear she had put a lot of effort into this. He leaned against the side of his motorcycle, not in a rush to leave. He could feel the sun on his neck and the cool air coming off the ocean. It was a nice moment. "Business looks good today?" he asked her, just making conversation. The girl shrugged a little. "It's okay," she said. "Not too many people stopping." "Well, they don't know what they're missing," Keanu said. He meant it. There was something about the innocence of the scene that made him want to stay and chat for a moment. In a world where everyone was always rushing, stopping for lemonade felt like a small act of rebellion. He reached into his jacket pocket. He was just going to buy a cup, maybe give her a nice tip and make her day. That was the plan. Just a simple, kind gesture to a kid who was working hard on a hot afternoon. He had no idea that this simple stop was about to turn into something much more meaningful. He had no idea that this little girl with the messy braids was carrying a weight on her shoulders that no child should have to bear. As he pulled a dollar bill out of his wallet, the girl perked up. She grabbed a paper cup and the pitcher with both hands, ready to pour. Her hands were small, and she concentrated hard so she wouldn't spill a drop. Keanu watched her, noticing how careful she was. It was the little details that told you a lot about a person. He waited patiently, enjoying the sunshine and the quiet break from his ride. This was supposed to be a quick stop. Just a drink and a smile. But as he stood there looking at the girl's face, he started to notice something. She wasn't just bored. Underneath the polite smile and the excitement of a customer, there was a shadow in her eyes. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired from playing outside all day, but a deeper kind of tired. It was a look that said she was worried about something. Keanu didn't say anything about it yet. He just watched her pour the lemonade, the ice clinking softly against the paper cup. He took the cup from her and took a sip. It was sweet, maybe a little too sweet and tart, just like homemade lemonade should be. "It's perfect," he told her honestly. The girl beamed at the compliment. For a second, the worry in her eyes faded away, replaced by a bright, genuine joy. Keanu handed her the dollar bill. "Keep the change," he said easily. But as she reached out to take the money, she hesitated. She looked at the dollar, then back up at him. The smile wavered just a fraction. It was a tiny thing, almost unnoticeable, but Keanu saw it. He felt a small tug at his heart, an instinct that something wasn't quite right here. Why would a kid hesitate to take $1 for a 50-cent drink? He stood there holding the cup, the engine of his bike ticking as it cooled down in the sun. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, and realized that this wasn't just a random encounter. He felt like he was meant to stop here today. The air felt still, waiting for what would happen next. He took another sip of the lemonade and looked down at her with a gentle expression, waiting to see if she would say what was on her mind. The girl stared at the dollar bill in her hand, her eyes going wide for a second. It was a crisp, new bill, and it looked very different from the handful of loose change she had sitting in an old glass jar next to the pitcher. She quickly shook her head and looked up at the tall man standing by his motorcycle. "No, no, I can't take this," she said, her voice serious. She was already fumbling with the lid of the glass jar, trying to twist it open. "I have to give you change. You gave me too much." Keanu smiled at her. It was a real smile, one that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made his whole face look warmer. He held up a hand to stop her. He didn't want her to struggle with the tight lid. He could see that her hands were a little sticky from the lemonade, and she was having a hard time getting a grip. "Please keep it," he said gently. "Think of it as a tip." "For the excellent service." The girl stopped struggling with the jar. She looked at the money, then back at him. She seemed surprised. In her world, 50 cents was the price, and that was that. Adults usually paid exactly what they owed and hurried away. They didn't just give money away for no reason. But there was something about this man that made her want to believe him. He didn't look like he was lying, he just looked kind. "Are you sure?" she asked, tilting her head to the side. "Absolutely," Keanu nodded. "You worked hard for this. You deserve it." Slowly, she lowered the jar back down to the table. She carefully folded the dollar bill and slid it into her pocket, patting it once to make sure it was safe. A small, relieved smile appeared on her face. For a moment, the worry that had been clouding her eyes seemed to lift. It was just $1, but to her, right now, it felt like a lot more. Keanu took another sip of the lemonade. It was ice cold and incredibly sweet, the kind of sweet that only comes from adding too much sugar, which is exactly how homemade lemonade should taste. The ice cubes clinked against the paper cup as he lowered it. He looked out at the road for a moment, watching a shiny sports car speed by without even slowing down. The driver didn't notice the little girl or the man on the motorcycle. They were just blurs on the highway. "It's really good," Keanu said, turning his attention back to her. "Best I've had in a long time. Did you make the recipe yourself?" The girl nodded proudly, sitting up a bit straighter on her plastic crate. "Yes." "It's a secret recipe," she whispered loudly, leaning in slightly as if she were sharing a state secret. "I add a little bit of honey. And I squeezed the lemons all by myself this morning." "I can tell," Keanu said. "That's the secret. You have to do it yourself." "It tastes better that way." He leaned back against his motorcycle, crossing one ankle over the other. He wasn't in a hurry. He could feel the engine of the bike cooling down behind him, making soft, metallic clicking noises in the quiet air. The sun was starting to dip a little lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. It was a peaceful moment, just two people enjoying a drink on a hot afternoon. "You know," Keanu said, looking around the stand, "when I was your age, I tried to sell lemonade too, but I don't think I was as good at it as you are." "Really?" she asked, looking surprised. "You drank lemonade when you were little?" "Absolutely," he laughed softly. "I was a kid once, believe it or not. I lived in a big city, though, not by the ocean like this. It was harder to get customers because everyone was always in such a rush." The girl seemed to think about this for a moment. She looked down at her table, tracing the edge of the cardboard sign with her finger. "It's hard here, too," she said quietly. "Most people just drive really fast. They don't look over." Keanu's heart gave a small tug. He looked at the empty road and then back at her stand. It was a perfect little setup. She had drawn sunflowers on the sign in bright yellow marker. She had even set out a few extra napkins. But she was right. The world was moving too fast to notice a child selling lemonade for 50 cents. "Well, their loss," Keanu said firmly. "They missed out." The girl looked up at him and smiled again. It was a shy smile, but it reached her eyes this time. She seemed to relax, realizing that this stranger wasn't going to rush off. He was actually listening to her. That was a rare thing for a grown-up to do. Keanu finished his lemonade, crushing the empty paper cup slightly in his hand. He looked around for a trash can but didn't see one. "Do you have a trash bin?" he asked. She pointed to a small grocery bag hanging off the side of the table. "Right there." He tossed the cup in. The bag rustled, empty except for his cup. He looked at the pitcher of lemonade. It was still mostly full. She hadn't sold much today. He remembered seeing her sitting there as he drove up, swinging her legs, looking lonely. He looked at her clothes again. Her t-shirt was clean but faded, and her sneakers were scuffed at the toes. It wasn't that she looked messy, but she didn't look like a kid who just went out to play for fun. She looked like she was on a mission. There was a determination about her that was a little too serious for a girl her age. Most kids set up stands to buy video games or toys. They wanted the newest action figure or a colorful backpack. He wondered what she wanted, what was important enough to make her sit out here in the heat all day. "So," Keanu started, keeping his voice casual. He didn't want to make her feel like he was prying, but he was curious. "You're doing a great job here. What are you saving up for? Is it a new bike? Or maybe some video games?" He expected her to rattle off a list of toys. Maybe she wanted a new doll or a skateboard. That was the usual answer. But when he asked the question, the light in her eyes didn't sparkle with excitement. Instead, her face changed. The smile slowly faded away, replaced by a look of sadness that seemed too old for her face. She looked down at her hands, which were folded in her lap. She kicked at the dirt with the heel of her sneaker, biting her lip. The air between them suddenly felt heavier. The easy, happy feeling from the last few minutes seemed to evaporate. Keanu waited. He could sense that something was wrong. He shifted his weight slightly, standing up straighter, his full attention on her. He knew that look. It was the look of someone carrying a burden that was too heavy for them. I'm not saving for toys," she said softly. Her voice was so quiet now that he had to lean in a little to hear her over the sound of the wind. "No," Keanu asked gently. He didn't push. He just let the silence hang there, giving her space to speak if she wanted to. The girl took a deep breath. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw how glossy her eyes were. She was fighting hard not to cry. She looked at the glass jar with the coins, then at the pocket where she had put his dollar bill. "I just want to help my mom," she whispered. Her voice trembled just a little bit. Keanu stayed silent. He didn't say anything like, "That's nice," or "You're a good girl." He could tell there was more to it. He could feel that the story behind those simple words was going to be difficult to hear. He looked at her with soft, encouraging eyes, letting her know that it was okay to keep talking, that he was there to listen. The sun continued to shine down on the little stand, but the mood had completely changed. What started as a simple, happy transaction, a man buying a drink from a kid, was turning into something much deeper. Keanu had a feeling that this stop wasn't just about lemonade anymore. He was about to hear something that would stay with him for a long time. Keanu looked at the girl with a gentle expression on his face. He could see that she wasn't just making small talk. She wasn't trying to be polite or cute. She meant what she said. She wanted to help her mother. It was a sweet thing to hear, but the way she said it carried a heavy weight. Most kids her age were worried about school recess or what cartoon was on TV. This girl seemed to be worried about things that were much bigger than her. "That is very kind of you," Keanu said softly. He leaned back a little against the leather seat of his motorcycle, crossing his arms over his chest. "Moms appreciate that. I'm sure she loves you very much." The girl nodded, but she didn't smile. She looked down at her sneakers again, tracing a circle in the dirt with the toe of her shoe. The wind blew a few strands of hair across her face, and she tucked them behind her ear without looking up. The air felt different now. It wasn't just the calm ocean breeze anymore. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that something was wrong. Keanu was an observer. He spent his life watching people, trying to understand them so he could play them on screen. He was good at reading feelings, and right now, the feeling coming from this small girl was sadness. It was a deep, quiet sadness that she was trying very hard to hide. "She works a lot," the girl mumbled almost to herself. "She works 2 jobs sometimes, but she still looks tired when she comes home." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's hard," he said. "It's hard to see your parents tired." He didn't ask her why. He didn't push her to explain. He just let her talk. He knew that if you push too hard, people close up like clams. But if you just sit and wait, they often open up on their own. He stayed quiet, letting the sound of the waves crashing in the distance fill the space between them. The girl looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. She seemed to be deciding if she could trust him. He was a stranger, a man on a motorcycle who stopped for a drink, but he hadn't rushed away. He had listened, he had been kind, he didn't look scary, he looked safe. "I want to buy her something nice," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "Something that will make her happy. So maybe she won't be so stressed." Keanu smiled, but it was a sad smile. "That's a great goal. What kind of things does she like? Does she like flowers or maybe books?" The girl shook her head. "No, not flowers. They die too fast. I want to get her something that lasts, something real." She stopped talking. She looked down the road, watching a truck drive past in the distance. The dust from the road kicked up a little around her table. She took a deep breath, and Keanu noticed her shoulders shaking just a little bit. She was fighting back tears. She was trying to be brave, but it was becoming too much for her. Keanu pushed himself off the motorcycle. He didn't want to tower over her while she was feeling this way. He wanted to be on her level. He squatted down, resting his arms on his knees, so his face was right in front of hers. It made him look smaller, less like a grown-up and more like a friend. "Hey," he said quietly. "It's okay. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but sometimes talking about it helps. I'm a pretty good listener." The girl looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second the wall she had built up cracked. Her eyes filled with water, sparkling under the bright sun. She quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, sniffing once. I just want to help," she whispered. Her voice was shaking now. "I want to fix it." Keanu waited. He could feel the gravity of the situation. This wasn't about a toy anymore. It wasn't even just about being a helpful daughter. This was about survival. He had a feeling in his gut that this story was going to break his heart, but he needed to hear it. He needed to know what was making this young girl so sad. "You can't fix everything by yourself," Keanu said gently. "Even grown-ups have trouble fixing things, but you are doing a really good job trying. 50 cents at a time." The girl let out a small, sad laugh. It was a hollow sound. 50 cents isn't very much," she said. "It takes a long time to make enough money when you only sell lemonade for 50 cents. "That's true," Keanu agreed. "But every bit counts. How much have you made so far today?" "Before I came," she looked away, embarrassed. Nothing, she admitted. You are my first customer. I've been here since morning. Keanu felt a pang of guilt for all the cars he had seen speeding past. He felt proud that he had stopped, but sad that he was the only one. He looked at the full pitcher of lemonade and the empty street. Well, I'm glad I stopped, he said firmly, and I'm glad I'm your first customer. The girl looked back at him. The silence stretched out again. She looked to her left, then to her right, checking the street. It was still empty. There was no one around but them. It felt like they were in their own little bubble, separated from the rest of the world. She leaned in closer to the table, lowering her voice even more, as if she was about to tell him a dangerous secret. I'm not just saving for a gift, she whispered. She looked Keanu right in the eyes, and he saw the pain there. It was a sharp, piercing pain that no child should have to feel. Okay, Keanu said slowly. What are you saving for? She took a shaky breath. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so tight that her knuckles were turning white. She looked down at the glass jar with the few coins in it. She looked at the dollar bill in her pocket. We don't have much food at home, she said, her voice barely audible. Mom tries to hide it. She eats my crust from my sandwich so I don't know she's hungry, but I know I see her. Keanu stayed perfectly still. He didn't react with shock or pity. He just kept looking at her with steady, kind eyes. He didn't want her to feel ashamed. He wanted her to feel heard. And, she continued, her voice cracking. She stopped and swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump in her throat. And, my little brother, his birthday is tomorrow. He's turning 6. He really wants a cake, a real one with frosting. Not just a cupcake. She stopped there. She couldn't say any more. The tears finally spilled over, rolling down her cheeks in hot, fast tracks. She didn't make a sound, she just let them fall. She looked at Keanu, her eyes full of a desperate hope mixed with a terrible sadness. She had told him the truth. She had told him why she was sitting on the side of the road in the hot sun, trying to sell lemonade that nobody wanted to buy. Keanu looked at her, and his heart felt like it was being squeezed tight in his chest. He saw the love she had for her family. He saw the burden she was carrying. He saw a little girl who was trying to be the parent, trying to fix the problems that were too big for her hands. He didn't say anything right away. He just reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. It was a light touch, just enough to let her know he was there. He didn't tell her it would be okay, because he didn't know that yet. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to leave this stand until he did everything he could to help. The 50-cent lemonade had suddenly become the most important thing he had ever bought. Keanu stayed right where he was, squatting down so he could look her in the eye. He didn't stand up and look away. He didn't try to change the subject to something easier to talk about. He just kept his hand gently on her shoulder, letting her know that she wasn't alone. The tears were falling fast now, leaving wet tracks on her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. She just stood there, holding the weight of the world on her small shoulders, finally letting someone else see how heavy it was. He looked at the girl, really seeing her. He saw the bravery it took for her to stand out here all day. He saw the love she had for her mother and her brother. Most adults would have crumbled under that kind of pressure, but here she was, trying to solve it with a pitcher of lemonade and a handwritten sign. Hey, Keanu said softly, his voice low and calm like a quiet stream. It is okay to let it out. You have been holding this in for a long time, haven't you? The girl nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand again. She took a shaky breath, trying to stop the crying, but it was hard. Once the dam breaks, it is hard to stop the water from flowing. I just want him to have a cake, she whispered, her voice trembling. He is 6. He is in kindergarten. He talks about it every day. He wants a chocolate cake with sprinkles. He keeps asking me if I think the cake will be good. She paused, choking back a sob. I told him it would be the best cake ever. But I don't know how I'm going to get it. I counted my money last night. I have $3.12. That isn't enough for a big cake. Maybe just a cupcake? Keanu felt a sharp pain in his chest. He thought about the little brother, waiting at home, excited about his birthday, having no idea that his sister was out here on the side of the highway, worrying about how to make his wish come true. It was the innocence of children that made these moments so hard. They believed everything would work out. They trusted the world to be good, and when the world wasn't good, it broke them. You are a very good sister, Keanu said, and he meant it with all his heart. Your brother is lucky to have you, and your mom. She sounds like she loves you too very much to give up her food for you. The girl looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. She is the best mom, she said fiercely, despite her tears. She works hard, I just want to help her. I don't want her to be sad on my brother's birthday. I don't want her to worry about dinner. Keanu nodded slowly. He understood now. It wasn't just about the cake. It was about taking the worry off her mother's shoulders, even if just for one day. It was about trying to fix a situation that was broken through no fault of their own. He looked at the lemonade stand again. It seemed so small now. The table, the pitcher, the little jar of coins. It was such a small weapon to fight against big problems like hunger and bills. But it was all she had, and she was giving it everything she had. The sun was starting to go down a bit, casting long shadows across the road. The air was getting a little cooler. The girl shivered slightly, and Keanu squeezed her shoulder gently. "Listen to me," he said. He wanted to make sure she heard him, really heard him. "You are doing a brave thing. You are doing more than most grown-ups do. You should be proud of yourself." She looked at him, sniffing. "Am I?" "Yes," Keanu said firmly. "You are a hero. Sitting here in the sun, trying to help your family, that is what heroes do." She blinked at him, the tears slowing down just a little. The word hero seemed to hang in the air between them. She had never thought of herself that way. She just thought she was doing what she had to do. "But I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "What if I don't sell enough? What if tomorrow comes and I have to tell him there is no cake?" That was the fear, Keanu realized, the fear of disappointment. The fear of seeing the look on her brother's face when the world let him down. It was a terrible feeling, knowing that you might not be able to protect someone you love from getting hurt. Keanu stood up slowly. His knees popped a little bit, and he smiled, breaking the tension for just a second. He looked out at the ocean, then back at the girl. He knew he couldn't fix everything for them. He couldn't pay their bills or find her mom a job. But standing right there on that dusty roadside, he could fix this. He could make sure that tomorrow there was a cake. He could make sure that tonight they didn't have to worry about dinner. He looked at the glass jar on the table. It was so empty. It represented hours of work and heartbreak, all for a handful of coins. It wasn't right. It just wasn't right. "You know," Keanu said, his voice thoughtful. "Sometimes the world has a way of working things out. Sometimes help comes from places you don't expect." The girl looked up at him, wiping her face one last time. She looked exhausted. The energy she had been using to hold back the tears was gone, leaving her looking small and fragile. "Like a stranger stopping for lemonade?" she asked, a tiny hint of hope in her voice. "Exactly like that," Keanu said. He looked down at her with a look of pure kindness. "Sometimes a stranger stops, and he realizes that this lemonade is the most important thing he has tasted all day. Because it isn't just lemonade, it's love, it's hope." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a wallet yet. He just stood there, his hand in his pocket, looking at her. He wanted to make sure she understood that her effort mattered, that she wasn't invisible. "You didn't give up," Keanu told her. "Even when nobody stopped, you stayed here, you kept believing. That is why this is going to work, because you didn't quit." The girl took a deep breath and nodded. She felt a little bit better hearing him say that. She didn't feel so silly anymore for crying. She didn't feel so helpless. She felt like maybe, just maybe, things might be okay. "Thank you," she whispered, "for listening. Nobody listens to kids." Keanu smiled, a sad but beautiful smile. "Well, they should. Kids often know more about what is important than adults do." He looked around, checking the road one more time. It was still quiet. Just the two of them, the ocean, and the little wooden table. The moment was peaceful, but heavy with the truth of what she had told him. Keanu felt a determination building up inside him, a strong desire to make this right. He knew what he had to do. He was going to make sure that her brother got his chocolate cake with sprinkles. And he was going to make sure her mom didn't have to eat any crusts tonight. He took his hand out of his pocket and looked at the girl. "I think," he said slowly, "that we need to have a little business meeting. I think the price of your lemonade just went up." The girl looked at him with confusion in her eyes. She wiped her face one last time and tilted her head to the side. "The price went up," she asked, "but the sign says 50 cents. Keanu smiled, a warm, knowing smile that reached his eyes. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out his old, battered leather wallet. It was worn smooth from years of use, the edges frayed just a little bit. He flipped it open and looked inside. He didn't count the money. He didn't look at the numbers, he just took out everything that was in there. It was a thick stack of bills. 50s, 20s, hundreds, all mixed together. To him, it was just money. It was something he used to buy groceries or pay for gas. But to this girl, sitting at a wobbly table on the side of the road, it was a fortune. It was more than she had probably ever seen in her entire life. Inflation is crazy these days, Keanu said gently, trying to keep his voice light so he wouldn't scare her. And honestly, this is the best lemonade I have ever tasted. It deserves a premium price. He held the money out to her. The stack of bills looked huge in his large hand. He didn't hand it to her like he was handing over a tip. He held it out with both hands like he was presenting something precious. The girl froze. She stared at the money, her eyes going wide as saucers. She looked at the stack of green paper, then up at Keanu, then back at the money. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Take it," Keanu said softly. He nodded his head, encouraging her. "Please, it belongs to you. You earned it." I can't," she stammered, shaking her head frantically. "That is too much. I can't take all that. It's just lemonade." "It's not just lemonade," Keanu corrected her. He leaned in closer, making sure she understood every word. "This is for the recipe. This is for the hard work. This is for sitting out here in the sun all day when nobody else stopped. And this," he paused, looking deep into her eyes, "is for your brother's birthday cake. And for your mom, so she doesn't have to worry about dinner tonight." The girl let out a small gasp. Her hands trembled as she slowly reached out. She took the money from him. It felt thick and heavy in her small hands. She held it like it was made of glass, afraid that if she squeezed too tight it might disappear. It was real. It was actually real. "Are you sure?" she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes again. "This is enough for everything, for the cake and groceries and maybe even a present." "I am sure," Keanu said. He reached out and gently closed her fingers over the money, making a fist so she would hold it tight. "You have a big heart. You deserve this. Go buy the biggest chocolate cake they have. Get the one with the extra sprinkles. And tell your brother happy birthday for me, okay?" The girl broke down. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She sobbed, but these were different tears than before. These weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of relief. She looked at the money, then at the man who had changed her entire day in just a few minutes. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was a movie star. To her, he was just a guardian angel on a motorcycle. Before Keanu could step back, the girl jumped up from her crate and threw her arms around his waist. She buried her face in his leather jacket, crying openly. Keanu stood there, surprised for a second, but then he wrapped his arms around her, hugging her back gently. He rested his chin on top of her head. He could feel her shaking against him, feel the weight of her worry lifting away. "You're going to be okay," he whispered into her hair. "You are going to make them very happy." She squeezed him tight, then let go, stepping back. She quickly wiped her face, trying to pull herself together. She looked down at the money in her hand, then up at him with a look of pure gratitude that Keanu would never forget. "Thank you," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Thank you so much. You saved my birthday." "I think you saved your own birthday," Keanu said with a wink. "I just helped a little bit." He straightened up and walked back over to his motorcycle. He picked up his helmet. The air felt lighter now. The heavy sadness that hung over the lemonade stand was gone, replaced by a buzzing energy of hope. The girl was clutching the money, already planning the trip to the store in her head. Keanu put his helmet on, fastening the strap under his chin. He looked at the girl one last time. She was smiling now, a real, beaming smile that lit up her whole face. She looked like a 9-year-old girl again, not a worried adult. "You take care of yourself," he said through the visor. "I will," she yelled, waving at him. Keanu swung his leg over the bike and sat down. He kicked the stand up and put the key in the ignition. With a deep rumble, the engine roared to life. The sound echoed off the hills. He checked the mirrors, seeing the girl standing there, waving frantically, the money clutched safely in her hand. He revved the engine once, a friendly goodbye, and then pulled out onto the road. He accelerated smoothly, the wind rushing past him again. As he rode away, he didn't look back at the stand. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, but his mind was still with the girl. He felt a warm glow inside his chest. It was a better feeling than any movie premiere, any award, or any compliment from a critic. It was the feeling of knowing that, for one family, tonight was going to be okay. There was going to be food on the table. There was going to be a cake with sprinkles. A mother was going to see her daughter smile, and a little boy was going to have the birthday he dreamed of. The miles ticked by on the odometer. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky orange and purple as evening approached. The traffic got heavier as he got closer to the city, but Keanu didn't mind. He felt peaceful. He knew that the world could be a hard place. He knew that people struggled every day. He had seen a lot of pain in his own life. But moments like this reminded him that there was good in the world, too. Sometimes you just had to stop for lemonade to find it. He thought about the girl's bravery. He thought about her love for her family. He hoped she would never lose that spirit. He hoped that whenever life got hard, she would remember the day a stranger stopped and paid way too much for a cup of lemonade. As he rode off into the sunset, the engine humming beneath him, Keanu smiled inside his helmet. It wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Just a few dollars, a few minutes of time. But for the girl by the side of the road, and for Keanu himself, it was everything. It was a reminder that kindness costs nothing, but it is worth more than gold. And with that thought in his heart, he disappeared into the flow of traffic, carrying the memory of a 50-cent lemonade that was worth a fortune.